Peace, God. It's good to hear you adding on. I love you and I'm proud to see the way in which you stand is strong. Wrong may be that right way to learn. That's why wisdom is a bridge that only the foolish try to burn. The God life said. In today's episode, I wanted to go off the script for a little bit and just build with you about some of the things that I've been dealing with lately, just in terms of my everyday life, things that I've been seeing on social media, and to give those of you a little bit of encouragement in terms of some of the things that you can do to be more self-actualized and to fulfill your purpose and be successful in your undertakings. One of the things that I recently had an opportunity to do was speak to a group of high school students who were visiting a local university on a sociology camp. And it's one of the first ones that have been created here in this country. And I had a beautiful opportunity to talk to them about two key points that I think that are vital in terms of them being successful and self-actualizing who and what they are. The first thing that I did is I went around the room and I asked them, what is the most important resource you have right now? And I got a lot of answers. I got, your mind. I got who you are. Some said the community. Other ones said your education. But I said, all of those are great. But at this very point right now, especially seeing that this is the final day of the camp that you just participated in and all of the various different activities you were involved in and the things that you've learned, from this point moving forward, your greatest resource that you have right now is time. Time. Because you could never get that back. One of the things that I did a little self-reflection on is the fact that I'm very, very efficient with the way in which I organize my time. I don't waste my time, and I strive not to waste others' time as well. And that's been a challenge for me. There's a lot of things that come along with that. I was watching this interview one time with Will Smith, and he was talking to Tavis Smiley, and he was talking about how he's not afraid to die on a treadmill. And he said, I'm not the most attractive. I'm not the most talented. You can have 9 categories over me. But my work ethic, if you were to step on a treadmill, there's only 2 things that will happen. I will die or you will get off. And he just talked about how his work ethic is on a borderline sickness. And I could really relate to that because through all of the various different things that I do, sometimes I may not get enough rest. I've been eating 1 meal a day for years now. There's other different things that I do. And my appropriation of time is something that's seen in other people in terms of those who are striving to be self-actualized and to be successful in their undertakings. For example, the other day, beautiful summer day on a Saturday morning, I'm up at the crack of dawn. And then I'm doing a few other things before I had an opportunity to get to the library when it opened. But I'm there when the library opens. And that is on a beautiful summer day on a Saturday. You can have all of the talent in the world. But what really distinguishes the person that's able to accomplish their goals from the person that just has talent is work ethic. If you're talented, that's something that may naturally depreciate in value over time because there's nothing that you naturally have to work at. It's something you're just born with, an ability. So if you look at it, talent is something that plateaus. If you're talented, that's kind of like it's it. You're good at it and that's what it is. If you have work ethic, something that you're always striving to do and always striving to evolve in and always striving to elevate in, that's something that does not plateau. It's something that always elevates your condition. It's something that always refines or perfects or beautifies anything that you're striving to do because it's something that you're working at every day. One of the brothers I was in the room, I asked him, okay, you wanted to be a basketball player. If Steph Curry shoots, say, for example, 5,000 jump shots at practice every day, if you want to be nearly as good as him, how many jump shots do you need to shoot? Matter of fact, if you want to be a better shooter than Steph Curry, how many jump shots do you need to shoot if he shoots 5,000 at practice every day? And he said 10,000. I was like, correct. You have to be that much better or willing to go harder than the average person that has been successful in their undertakings. And that was the first point that I emphasized to the youth. You have to maximize your time. You cannot waste your time. That is your greatest resource, and you will never get that back. So moving forward, leaving this camp and being exposed to a lot of the different activities and the things that you've learned here on the college campus, you need to start planning for your future. One of the brothers I pulled aside and I asked him, what does he want to be once he leaves high school? And he said he wants to go into the FBI in that particular career field. So I asked him, what college would you go to that specializes in what you need to learn in order for you to get to where you say you want to go? He sat and thought for a minute, and I said, that's what you need to research. You need to know where it is that you're striving to go. As 5%ers, one of the things that we say is knowledge is the foundation. Knowledge is the foundation. That is the basis or the premise upon which we stand. Having awareness and accumulating the proper information equips us with the ability to make the wisest decisions in our life. You can't make wise decisions if you don't know nothing first. That is why knowledge is number one and wisdom is the second principle. Because you have to have knowledge first. You have to know what it is you're doing before you even do it. Because if not, you're going to be forced to go back to square one, because you're going to learn that there's things you needed to know first. That's not nothing that a person has to be convinced of or anything like that. That's just basic common sense. That's supreme mathematics. Once you realize that time is your greatest resource and you can't waste it, you have to ensure that each and every day you're working towards your goal and putting time into what it is that you're saying you're striving to do. If you have a plan of being a chef, you need to be researching things every day. Watch the Food Channel or something like that to get ideas from various different chefs around the world. Research things on the internet since you're on social media all the time. You need to invest in what your goals are in order for you to be where it is you say you want to be. And you cannot waste that time, because that is something that you will not get back. It is your greatest resource. I also emphasize that they can't limit themselves, and it's important to expose yourself to the various different opportunities within this world. The planet Earth is 196,940,000 square miles, 57,255,000 square miles of land, and 139,685,000 square miles of water. It's a very large place. It's larger than the city in which you dwell in. It's larger than the school that you go to. It's larger than your neighborhood. It's larger in all of those various different places that give you limited resources in terms of your ability to navigate and explore this world. So if you have a physical limitation from being able to go different places and see certain things, you have to do it in the mind. You have to read. You have to research. You have to explore. Use the internet to go places. Use books to go places. One of the brothers is 16 years old, and I said, your age is equivalent to a 16-year library, which means you have 16 books, essentially, as reference materials on the decisions that you can make in life or the potentiality of what you can see your possibilities are to do. I'm 41 at this point, which means I have 41 books in my library. I have a little bit more resources, but what our goal should be is expanding our library by interacting with various different people who also have books in their library. That's why it's important to learn and to get guidance from our elders, because they can equip us with more books that we can put into our library and see more possibilities beyond the 16 years or the 41 years we've been on this planet Earth. Again, gaining more knowledge and expanding that foundation gives us more of an ability to make wiser decisions in our life. I was invited to come back and speak to another group of youth who will be attending another camp throughout the summer. And whenever I have an opportunity to speak to anybody about something significant in terms of being self-actualized, achieving their goals in life, and one of the things that people oftentimes say is, I don't have nothing to tell nobody, right? Some people think that, well, if they haven't achieved certain goals, or if they're stuck in a dead-end job, or they're dissatisfied about this, or they don't think they're where they need to be at in life, they don't have something to share with somebody. But if you've been on this planet, you have books in your library to share with others who may not have those books in their library, especially the youth. Because if you're older than someone, You have a book that that person does not have. There's experiences that you've gone through, whether you've succeeded at things or failed at things. You have a story to tell, and it's important to share that with other people because you can help equip them with the proper information to make wiser decisions in life. All of us have that ability, all of us. And we can never minimize or overlook the fact that all of us are not only students in life, but we're also equipped to be teachers, especially to our youth. One of the more recent phenomena that I've been seeing is a lot of people starting to become a little bit more awake and conscious of not only what's going on within themselves, but also what's going on in the world. And it's a double-edged sword because on one hand, you're proud and you're excited to see people starting to learn about things that you knew 20 years ago. Yet at the same time, you're starting to see the distorted perspective of what consciousness or awareness actually is. Over the years, we've seen this growth of this thing called the conscious community. And with this thing called the conscious community have come people who are under the impression that they're conscious simply because they may watch a bunch of videos, they may engage in debates on social media with various different people, they share memes or articles, but yet they may not even have a book that's a decade old in their personal library at home. They just stopped going to church. Matter of fact, their Easter suit is still hanging up in the closet. They just stopped going to church last year. But yet these same people are online banging on other people like Rowdy Roddy Piper in the Piper's Pit. You know, not only is that immature, but it also is very disrespectful because some of these people have very strong ties and relationships still to the institution that they're banging against so hard. You know, people may have family members who not only have founded churches, but are actually in the church as they speak. So it's not healthy in terms of family dynamics. Yet at the same time, I can also relate with how disgusted some people may be at people within these institutions. Because I know a lot of righteous Christians, I know a lot of righteous Muslims, I know a lot of righteous Buddhists, I know a lot of righteous people who practice religion from various different perspectives. And then I also know people who are not righteous, that practice Christianity, that practice Islam, that practice Buddhism and any of these other different religions. So it's really upon the person's ability to implement the principles and to stand by the values that that institution can actually offer them. One of the things that's vital to understand, and this goes out to those of you who are just starting to become conscious, and I say just starting to become conscious within the span of the last 10 years. You just started to read books, you just started to attend lectures, you just started to find out about a lot of different scholars within the nationalist or the black conscious movement. Those of you who are listening, one of the most vital things to keep in mind, and I elaborated on this in my other episode, The Threefold Path, there are 3 essential things that happen to you as you grow and develop. Number 1 is that you begin to assess the things that you've learned all your life. And it's important to do that because sometimes people just go through life blindly without critically analyzing anything. Kind of reminds me of my boy Jeff when I was growing up. Jeff prided himself on being able to cook, and he learned a lot of that from his father. Jeff one day was cooking a roast, and he cut both sides of the roast off, threw it in the garbage, and put it inside the pan to cook. Now, he had a lot of room in the pan, but I was wondering why he cut both sides of the roast off and threw that good meat in the garbage. So I said, Jeff, why you do that? And he said, yo, man, my dad taught me how to do that. So he never really gave me a real explanation, but I still didn't understand why he would do that. It just so happened that one time we were at his house, his father was cooking a roast. So I'm looking, his father did the exact same thing. He cut both sides of the roast off, put it in the pan, and cooked it. So I asked his father, like, I saw Jeff doing that, so why did you do that? He said, yo, my pop showed me how to do that. You could ask him. He's right over there in the living room. So I go over to the living room, and I asked Jeff's grandfather how come he taught his son and his grandson to cut off the ends of the roast before they put it in the pan in order to cook it. And his grandfather said, "Oh, when I was growing up, we had a little pot. So in order for the roast to fit in the pot, we had to cut both sides off so that we can cook it." Now here we have Jeff's father and him following the same tradition for 2 more generations that was not even necessary, simply because they never stopped to question why was this taught to them to begin with. They still had enough room, but they just followed in the tradition of what was handed on to them without critically analyzing it. A lot of us are just like Jeff. We follow in the traditions of those that passed it on to us without critically analyzing anything. So in growth and development, one of the first things that happen is we begin to assess some of those traditions. And in assessing those traditions, obviously we throw some things away, but we also need to be aware that there's things that we need to maintain. There's certain traditions that were passed on to us that were righteous. And some of those traditions that were passed on, we learned not only in the home, but outside of the home. One of the first institutions as black people in this country that we founded was the church. And that was the first outside environment where we learned to socialize with one another, as well as reinforce some of the principles and values we learned at home. So we learned a lot in the church, especially when it was more orientated towards nationalism and revolution at a time when we were segregated from America. So that's something that we should never throw away. We learned a lot of things from our grandparents and our great-grandparents and our parents. In assessing the things that we no longer need, that no longer serve a purpose, we also have to be aware that there's things that we should retain because they're important. The third thing that happens is we learn things that we never heard before, things that are new to us. And when we learn things that's new to us, that is a very uncomfortable place to be in oftentimes, especially if it conflicts with what we've learned for maybe 20-something years of our life or 30-something years of our life. There may be foods that we're taught that we no longer need to eat, and it takes an attitude adjustment to stop it. We can't stop everything cold turkey. There's certain things that we need to work on in order to give up, and that may come along with being aware of new information that we have to integrate into our life in order to grow and develop. So those are 3 things. That is a threefold path. There's things that we assess about our life that we've learned that we need to get rid of. There's things that we learn about our life that we need to retain. And then there's things that we learn new that we have to learn to integrate into our life in order to grow and develop. Regardless of what we learn, we are still a member of a family. Not only our direct family or our nuclear family that we're born into, or even if we were adopted, we're still a part of some family. And we're a part of a greater family called the human family. So we're still connected. So regardless of what we learn, the true test of growth and development is how well we're able to manage those relationships that we are still going to have to maintain for the rest of our life. If we're learning something, and that's putting us into a position where we're antisocial and alienated and we're not able to even communicate with our family members or our community members or other people of other nationalities anymore, that's not a good thing. That's not the basic premise upon which you could establish civilization, because civilization is a social construct. It means you're interacting with other people. So it's important for us to be able to do that with the things that we learn. Knowledge of self and growing and being conscious is not about us being on an island by ourselves. It's really about a Pangea type of project where we're able to link ourselves with not only the members of our direct family, but also the members of the human family. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't even be possible to learn anything without the contributions of others. You can't even go to the bathroom without the contributions of others. You know what I'm saying? People overlook things like that. Somebody invented toilet paper. And if somebody didn't invent toilet paper, there probably wouldn't be no leaves on the trees right now. So we have to be conscious of the fact that Reciprocity is a part of the cycle of life. Everybody is giving and everybody is receiving. We inhale and we exhale. This whole planet is a living organism that breathes. So it's really about being a part of this entire cycle of life. We all need each other on some type of level. We all need each other. And without each other, we would have nothing. So I am because we are. You are because I am. Debate is good. You know, when I was younger and I first started to learn, I would debate a lot. I would actually go places to look for debates. You know, it was times where I would look forward to going different places just in order to challenge people's perspectives and stuff. There were times where I would invite Jehovah's Witnesses over my house on Saturday morning just so I could slay them. That was real immature of me. So debate has a place because it does help you sharpen your sword, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind, what is the purpose? Am I doing this just to be rhetorical? Am I doing it just like I'm in a Greek school of sophists where they learn the art of debate just to see who sounds the best, not necessarily for the purpose of what is actually right? Because those are some of the things that I see oftentimes online, because some of the main people who are constantly debating and arguing and trying to prove a point about whatever it is that they believe or whatever it is they think they know, they're not actively doing anything in their own communities. They're unknown. They're just sitting behind a keyboard somewhere, arguing and debating with people, but yet not making an active impact in their own neighborhood, their own community, and their own city. That's not what the purpose of debate is for. As scientists of life, when we build with one another, and I'm strictly talking from a 5%er perspective, when we build with one another, that is no different than comparing journals as scientists of life. We're scientists comparing notes. And if there's something in their notes that I've never experienced or that I've never worked out, I add that to my notes and I put it into practice to see if it applies. It's all a mathematical process. So we're not debating or arguing with one another to see who's bigger or better, who knows more. We're just scientists comparing notes. And if there's something that I've worked out in my notes that is not correct, then I stand to be corrected. One of the problems with people who oftentimes engage in religion is that they build their perspective on a belief system, and it's not based upon empirical data, meaning they don't care what you know. They don't care what's known. They just base whatever they do on what they believe. And when you are dealing with a person that has that perspective, you cannot debate with them because they don't respect empirical data. They just respect whatever they believe and what they feel. And there is no wins if you having a conversation with a person like that. That's one thing that's important to keep in mind. A person that has a belief system, you can't out-argue them. You can't debate with them because they're not basing their perspective on empirical data or what you know or what's known. If it's 12 noon right now and they want to say it's nighttime where they're standing, even though beads of sweat is dripping down their face from the sun, there's nothing you can say to convince them otherwise because they believe that it's night. You can't argue with an irrational person. And it's not to say that everybody that deals with religion is irrational. It's just to say those type of people you shouldn't be wasting your time trying to argue and debate with, because you cannot win that argument, period. As scientists, we use pencils when we take our notes because, like I said, we stand to be corrected, which means we use both sides of the pencil. We use the eraser too. If it's something that I've learned that I need to correct, I'm going to erase that and write a better equation in order to get a better conclusion or to solve a problem that I'm seeking an answer to. That is the way a scientist approaches life. Science comes from the root word sire, which means to know. So a scientist is dedicated to knowing. So there's no pride in saying that you know so much or you're so aware or so conscious that you can no longer even communicate or get along with your own family members. Think about that for a second. Even if you have a sense of nationality, why would a person trust you to build a nation if you can't even get along with and manage the relationships with the nation or the family that you were born into? If you haven't worked things out at home, how are you equipped to be able to work things out abroad with people who you're not even related to? That makes no sense. And I tell you, that's one of the biggest challenges with our growth and development, not just the personal component, but also the interpersonal relationships that are connected to our growth and development. How we begin to relate to our own family members, how we begin to relate to our own community, and then ultimately how we begin to relate to the world and the planet in which we live on. As 5%ers, we're asked the question, why did God make devil? And that is our 38th degree. 3 is symbolic to understanding. 8 is symbolic to the principle of build or destroy. So that lesson in terms of understanding the principle of build or destroy is teaching us about adversity as well as resilience. Because if you didn't have an adversary, how would you know the extent of your power to be able to accomplish any type of goals? And unfortunately, we create our own devils sometimes. And instead of using our time in an appropriate way or just dealing with life on life's terms, we put different challenges in front of us that are not even necessary if we really understood that life itself is going to present natural challenges to our growth and development. It's not necessary to create more adversity for ourselves than what we necessarily need. And the purpose of that adversity is to show forth and prove our power. That not only are we all wise, but we're also righteous. Right and just is really a compound word, which means true. Righteous has right in it, and it has just in it. Those words mean true. So when you think about it, being able to overcome adversity is not just about being able to solve a problem. It's also about the ability to solve a problem in the right way and to maintain integrity in the process. I remember one time I was online and I seen this one brother having this conversation, and he was talking about the philosophy that sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And he was saying that if it comes down to it, if you were starving or if you needed food, clothing, and shelter, you may have to steal some of those things. You may have to resort to various different tactics in order to secure some of those necessities, which may not be the most righteous thing to do. And I disagreed. I said, in hindsight, which is always 20/20, you can see that there were other opportunities or avenues that you could have taken in order to solve a certain problem. But while you were in the midst, you may have not thought that there were other opportunities there. So even if you did make a decision that wasn't the most righteous thing to do at that time, in looking back at that, if you're still alive to look back at it, you can see that, damn, I could have did this instead. Yeah, I was starving, but if I would have known that it was 4 food banks in my city, I could have went and got free food from here, or I could have went to the soup kitchen over there, or I could have did this, that, and the third. You didn't have to resort to unrighteousness. And the fact that this person would say that there were times where you had to resort to devilishment, that shows me that he doesn't have enough confidence in the ability to show forth and prove his power. Righteousness or wisdom is symbolic to water. The same way that water seeks its own level, water is like wisdom in a sense where it finds its own path in terms of any obstacle that's in its way. So if you're looking at water as wisdom, water, if faced with a giant boulder in its path, it may just go right around that boulder. Or it may soak underneath the ground and resurface on the other side. Water can also evaporate, go over the boulder, and then distill on the other side. Water can freeze and push the boulder out of its path, but also water can penetrate that boulder if given enough time and patience. That is the same exact way that wisdom operates. Wisdom finds its own path. That is a relationship between wisdom, righteousness, and being just or true. If a person really understood omnipotence and omnipresence and omnipotence, the true and living God, then they would never have to resort to anything that compromises the integrity of the true and living God. This is a person that still wasn't convinced. What this person may have seen as an obstacle may be very different than what another person sees as an obstacle. So if a circumstance like that would break this person down to the point where they would deal with devilishment, Somebody else may be broken down easier than that. They may have less tolerance than this person in terms of succumbing to devilishment or falling victim to the devil's civilization. And that is important to consider because each person has their own degree of tolerance. To one person, they may be willing to cut your throat over $5. Somebody else, they get caught in a bind, they may lie to you. Somebody else, they may be willing to do other different things if they're feeling the pressure. Each one of these people are still not convinced that there is a righteous alternative to overcoming adversity and being resilient. They don't have the ability to show forth and prove their power that they are all wise and righteous. That's a very dangerous situation to put yourself in, especially if you're a parent or a guardian and you're responsible for other lives. With a person like this who has a philosophy that you got to do what you got to do, you don't know what their potential is. And their potential can ultimately mean the worst for you. If you're dealing with a person whose perspective on life is, I'm going to strive to find the right way to do things regardless to whom or what, and show forth and prove my power, that I am all wise and righteous, any kind of adversity that I deal with is just going to make me more resilient to be able to deal with any kind of circumstances in the future, that's the type of person that you can depend upon and that you can have some level of expectancy when it comes to handling different life situations. Not a person that's going to say, I'm going to do what I got to do. Because that person is telling you up front that they'll leave you out to dry if it gets too hot or they get too thirsty. To conclude this episode, I wanted to just say thank you. I appreciate you for tuning in. I will this was inspiring, empowering, and educating, and gave those of you some insight into what's been on my mind lately that I just wanted to share with all of you. I also encourage you to go by my website, Asia, at www.atlantischool.blogspot.com, where I write my free bi-monthly articles, and I also have links to all of my books and music. If you look in the top right corner, you can also register at Asia so that you can receive my articles immediately when I post them. Peace. Peace, God. It's good to hear you adding on. I love you and I'm proud to see the way in which you stand is strong. Wrong may be that right way to learn. That's why wisdom is a bridge that only the foolish try to burn.